Hey everyone! Welcome to the Bold and Beautiful 24. I'm Alessio, and I'm so excited to have you here. If you love Bold and Beautiful, then you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Alright, let's dive right in.
In the glittering world of Los Angeles, where fashion, family, and fierce rivalries collide under the polished lights of Forrester Creations, one return has the power to shake every foundation, and that return comes in the form of Steffy Forrester Finnegan, a woman who has never been anything less than a force of nature, a woman whose presence carries both the warmth of love and the storm of chaos. And as the doors of the Cliff House open and her heels click against the floor, her husband Finn feels his entire body tense with anticipation, dread, and overwhelming love all at once, for he had dreamed of this moment since the day she left, clutching her children with tears in her eyes, walking away not because she didn't love him, but because she feared for her safety, for her sanity, for the endless tug-of-war between herself, her past, and the people who threatened to tear her world apart. But now she was back, standing in their home with a suitcase by her side and a smile that didn't quite mask the storm she had endured, and Finn, overwhelmed, crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms as though he might never let her go, breathing her in like a man who had been drowning and finally broke the surface to find air, whispering her name, Steffy, with a reverence that made her heart ache, for though she had left, though she had kept secrets, though her love for him had been tested by the shadows of her family's enemies and the ghosts of her past, she had never stopped needing him, and in this moment she wanted nothing more than to surprise him not only with her return but with the news she had carried close to her heart in Europe, the secret she had guarded like a fragile flame, waiting for the right moment to let it burn bright. And as they clung to each other, their reunion became a tapestry of emotions, relief, longing, unspoken apologies, and the promise of renewal. But Finn, ever the steady protector, pulled back just enough to search her eyes with that earnest intensity that had made her fall for him in the first place, asking if she was back for good, if she was ready to rebuild what they had lost. And Steffy, fighting back tears, told him that she had returned not just for him, not just for the children, not just for herself, but because their story was far from over, because she had been carrying something with her that would change everything, a truth that would knock him off his feet. And though Finn thought she meant another threat, another enemy lurking in the shadows, Steffy laughed softly, shaking her head, telling him that for once the surprise wasn't a dark one, for once it was something that could only bring joy if they let it. And with trembling hands she reached for his, placing them gently against her stomach, a gesture so subtle yet so profound that Finn froze, his eyes widening as realization struck, his breath catching in his throat as the meaning sank in. And when she whispered the words, "I'm pregnant, Finn, we're having another baby," the entire world seemed to stop, the waves outside crashing louder, the silence inside the house deafening, until his shocked expression broke into tears and laughter all at once, because after everything they had been through, the betrayals, the near-death encounters, the family wars, the painful separations, they were now given a chance at new life, new hope, a fresh chapter in their love story. And he dropped to his knees, kissing her stomach with reverence, whispering his gratitude to the universe, vowing that nothing, no one, not Sheila, not Lee, not even the endless drama of the Forresters and Spencers would ever take this happiness from them. But even as they embraced this joy, shadows lingered on the horizon, for Steffy's return and her announcement would not only ripple through their family but also through the entire city of Los Angeles, shaking Ridge, Taylor, and Brooke, stunning Liam, rattling Hope, and most of all, igniting Sheila, who would hear of this new life and see it as her chance, her opening, her twisted justification to wedge herself deeper into Finn's world. For in Sheila's mind every baby born to her son is a legacy of her own bloodline, and she would not allow herself to be left in the cold, not when another grandchild was on the way. And while Steffy and Finn clung to each other in their moment of bliss, whispering about nursery colors and how Kelly would react, their joy was about to set off a chain reaction of drama, betrayal, and battles that would once again put their love to the ultimate test. For in Los Angeles, nothing stays peaceful for long, and Steffy's surprise, her return and her pregnancy, was not only a blessing but a spark, and everyone who has ever loved or hated the Forrester princess would soon feel the fire. The air in Los Angeles felt heavy with unspoken words and unfinished moments. And inside the Cliff House by the ocean, Finn sat at the edge of the sofa, shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the waves crashing against the rocks below, as if the tide itself could somehow carry him answers to the 1,000 questions that kept him awake every night, questions about his marriage, his wife, his family, and whether all the pieces that had once fit so perfectly together could ever be repaired after everything that had shattered. Because in truth, Finn had been drifting ever since Steffy left for Europe, taking the children with her, a decision that gutted him, though he had told himself it was temporary, just space. Just time, but weeks had bled into months, and the silence had become unbearable, leaving Finn to walk through days filled with patients, treatments, and long hospital shifts where he put on his professional mask only to come home to a house that felt more like a museum of memories than a home, the scent of Steffy's perfume still faint on her pillow, the children's toys still scattered in corners like ghosts of laughter, and his own heart aching with the hollow thud of absence. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly anticipate, was that Steffy Forrester was on her way back, her heart pounding with anticipation and nerves as she boarded the flight, her mind spinning with doubts about whether she was making the right choice, whether Finn would be ready for her return, whether the cracks in their marriage could be healed or whether her presence would only reopen wounds, because she had left with good reason, desperate to shield her children from the chaos of Sheila Carter's shadow, desperate to regain clarity in a world that had spun too far out of control, and while she had found strength in her time away, found moments of peace in the arms of her mother and in the European hills where the children laughed freely, she had also realized something so powerful it had cut through all the fear. She still loved Finn, she still needed him, and she couldn't let distance, danger, or doubt define the rest of their story, so here she was, clutching her passport with trembling hands, knowing that once she set foot back in Los Angeles, everything would change, and as the plane descended over the sparkling skyline, Steffy closed her eyes and whispered to herself that this was her family's future she was fighting for, and she had to be brave, because Finn deserved to know what she had decided, and the children deserved their father, and love, despite its messiness and heartbreak, deserved a second chance. And when the car pulled up outside the Cliff House hours later, the Pacific breeze whipping through her hair, Steffy stood frozen for a moment on the path leading to her front door, her heart slamming against her ribcage as if urging her forward, her eyes misting at the sight of the home she had missed so desperately, the home she had once shared so joyfully with Finn, and she clutched the handle of her suitcase, hearing the muffled sound of music drifting from inside, the faint glow of the lamp in the living room where Finn often sat late into the night, and she took a deep breath before stepping up, her heels clicking softly against the stone, each step feeling like a step back into a life she had almost convinced herself was lost. And then came the moment, the door slowly opened, Finn appearing in the frame, his face pale with shock, his lips parting as if he couldn't quite believe the sight before him, Steffy standing there, her dark hair cascading around her shoulders, her eyes filled with tears and fire all at once, her voice breaking as she whispered his name, Finn, and in that single instant, the weight of months of loneliness, fear, and uncertainty cracked open, flooding the room with raw emotion, Finn stumbling forward as if afraid she might vanish if he blinked, his hands reaching out but hesitating, his doctor's mind colliding with his husband's heart, unsure if this was real or a cruel dream, until Steffy set down her bag, closing the space between them, her hand lifting to his face with a tenderness that shattered the dam he had built inside himself, and the two of them fell into an embrace so fierce, so desperate, it was as though they were clinging not just to each other but to the very idea of hope itself. And yet, the surprise was not merely her return, because as Finn buried his face in her hair, inhaling the familiar scent that had haunted him in every lonely night, Steffy whispered the words that would forever change the course of their marriage, words that trembled with vulnerability yet carried the force of a promise. I came back because I realized I don't just want to try again, I want us stronger than before, and there's something I need to tell you, her voice catching as she pulled back just enough to meet his stunned gaze, because Steffy hadn't just returned to LA for reconciliation, she had returned with a decision that would alter everything, a decision about their family, about how they would face Sheila, about how she had chosen love over fear, and as Finn's eyes filled with tears, his arms tightening around the woman he thought he might have lost, the room seemed to hum with the electricity of fate, and though questions still hung heavy, about trust, about danger, about whether they could truly rebuild what had been broken, there was no denying the truth in that moment. Steffy Forrester had returned home, not as a woman fleeing her demons, but as a woman ready to fight for her husband, her children, and the love that had once made them unstoppable, and Finn, overcome with relief and awe, could only whisper her name over and over like a prayer answered, the crashing of the waves outside echoing their hearts as they stood locked in each other's arms, both knowing that this reunion was only the beginning of the next storm. Finn's hands shook as he held Steffy, not out of weakness but because every part of him was overwhelmed by the collision of relief, longing, and disbelief, the kind of trembling that comes when you suddenly find yourself standing face to face with the very thing you've been praying for every night, the thing you had convinced yourself might never come back. And as he buried his face against her shoulder, he breathed in the warmth of her return, his mind flashing back to every lonely dinner eaten at the counter, every night he sat awake listening to the hum of the ocean outside, every voicemail he left on her phone that went unanswered because she had needed distance, and every moment he doubted whether love, even theirs, could survive the crushing weight of Sheila Carter's shadow, because Sheila had been the specter that drove Steffy away, the nightmare lurking in every corner of their marriage, and Finn couldn't blame his wife for leaving, not when she had children to protect, not when the stakes were life and death, but now that she stood here, in their home, with the tears of determination shining in her eyes, Finn realized how close he had come to losing not just her but himself, because without Steffy he had been a man going through the motions, a doctor healing others while bleeding quietly on the inside, and now here she was, her lips trembling as she tried to form the words she had rehearsed on the long flight, words that carried both apology and resolve, words that would shake him even more than her presence, because Steffy's surprise wasn't simply her return, it was the revelation that she wasn't running anymore, that she was ready to face the monster that had haunted them, that she had discovered a strength in herself stronger than her fear, and that she wanted them to be united as never before, because in her time away she had watched their children grow without their father's laughter at the dinner table, she had felt the cold ache of an empty bed, she had heard the loneliness in Finn's voice when he called, and it had broken her, reminding her that love wasn't about hiding, love was about fighting, about taking risks together, about building something so strong that even Sheila couldn't destroy it, and when Steffy cupped Finn's face in her hands, her thumbs brushing away the tears that had finally spilled free, she told him that she had come back not just because she loved him but because she had made a decision about their future, a decision that terrified her but filled her with fire, because she had chosen to bring the children home. She had chosen to trust in Finn's strength, in their bond, in their ability to face Sheila head-on, and as Finn listened, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths, he felt the enormity of her trust sink into his bones, because Steffy was giving him the one thing he thought he had lost forever, her faith, her belief in him as her protector, her partner, her husband, and though fear still lingered in his veins, though questions about Sheila's next move hovered like storm clouds, Finn knew in that moment that this was a turning point, that love had returned to their home, that his wife had chosen him again, and so he kissed her with the kind of urgency that comes from knowing tomorrow isn't promised, the kind of kiss that carried every word he couldn't say, every promise he wanted to make, every desperate plea for them never to be torn apart again, and Steffy melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair, her tears mixing with his as the cliff house seemed to come alive again with the pulse of their reunion, the toys on the floor no longer symbols of absence but of the life they were ready to reclaim, the scent of her perfume no longer a ghost but a promise of tomorrow, and outside the waves crashed harder as if the universe itself was applauding their courage, and yet beneath the joy there was still the awareness that this was only the beginning, because reunions come with reckoning, and as Steffy finally pulled back, her eyes shimmering with both love and fear, she whispered that they had to talk about Sheila, that she had heard whispers even overseas, that the danger hadn't vanished.